Suppose somebody hits you in the nose hard enough to make your eyes water. You may also notice that your skin will grow hot, your mouth will go a bit dry, and your pulse will become faster. You will find that your head begins to swim with a strong desire to hit something in return. What you have just experienced, the basic emotion of anger, has passed. Why a slight impact to the nose leads to a series of physiological and mental changes has long been a matter of speculation, but most psychologists agree that a basic emotion like anger exists as an evolutionary trigger, and we call these the basic emotion anger, fear, surprise, disgust, joy, and sadness as described in the 1970s by anthropologist Paul Ekman. Over time, this list of basic emotions has been added to, subtracted from, and reshaped based on the idea that human emotions are universal. This notion suggests that for any given situation, like being hit in the nose, any individual in any culture would experience something like anger and would react the same. Under almost every explanation of emotions is the premise that they are naturally occurring response to a situation. There are also higher or moral emotions based on self-awareness, self-consciousness, and ability to empathize with others. The moral emotions are pride, guilt, embarrassment, and shame. Babies and their crying. While we may want to think that grown-up feelings and motivations are the same with even very young babies, there are huge differences between adult and baby emotions simply because emotions are tied to cognitive and physical development. Since babies haven't yet gained the experience that adults have, they are unable to experience emotions in quite the same way. Generally speaking, emotions begin in infancy in ways that look familiar but aren't true emotional experiences, says Pamela Cole, a researcher and professor of psychology at Pennsylvania State University. For example, the earliest smile, that of a 2 or 3-week-old baby, is the result of neurological activity, not an indication that the baby is happy as we might expect. During the first 6 months of life, it is not necessarily the case that babies are experiencing motions, explains Dr. Cole. For example, when it comes to what we think of as happiness, babies feel the sensation of a good and pleasant state, which is related to the concept of happiness. For every emotion, the seeds of the emotion we as adults feel can be seen in very young babies, but the ability to truly feel those emotions comes later. Now, let's look at the infant's emotions in the first year. Happiness. While a newborn's smiles are the result of involuntary neurological activity, at around 3 months of age, babies typically develop a social smile. Instead of their smile being the result of an internal state, babies can now react to external stimuli, particularly faces, which babies this age love to look at. Anger. A wailing, red-faced baby may seem angry. What adults might see as anger, a very young baby, which is under only 6 months, feels as the sensations of an unpleasant state. Maybe the baby is wet or hungry or tired. During the first 6 months of life, it's important for a baby to discover that when he has these sensations, which will later be called as emotions, things will get fixed. Fear. Fear is not an instinct. It is something that babies learn as they develop a memory. Without the ability to remember things, such as what situations and people are familiar, a baby cannot feel fear. So, when do these emotions develop? There is a difference between primary emotions and self-conscious emotions. Primary emotions are emotions that are present in humans and animals. These emotions appear in the first 6 months of the human infant's development. Primary emotions include surprise, interest, joy, anger, sadness, fear, and disgust. Emotions that are present in humans and other animals emerge early in life and are culturally universal. Examples are joy, anger, sadness, fear, and disgust. Leading researchers debate about how early in the infant years the emotions that we have described first appear and also the order of their appearance. Some researchers argue that jealousy does not emerge until approximately 18 months of age, whereas others emphasize that it is displayed much earlier. Some research studies suggest that the appearance of jealousy might occur as early as 6 months of age. In one study, 6-month-old infants observed their mothers either giving attention to a lifelike baby doll or to a book. When mothers directed their attention to the doll, the infants were more likely to display negative emotions such as anger and sadness, which may have indicated their jealousy. On the other hand, their expressions of anger and sadness may have reflected frustration in not being able to have the novel doll to play with. Cries and smiles are two emotional expressions that infants display when interacting with parents. These are babies' first forms of emotional communication. Crying is the most important mechanism newborns have for communicating with their world. Babies have at least 3 types of cries. Basic cry, a rhythmic pattern that usually consists of a cry followed by a briefer silence, then a shorter whistle that is higher in pitch than the main cry, then another brief rest before the next cry. Anger cry, a variation of the basic cry in which more excess air is forced through the vocal cords. Pain cry, a sudden, long, initial loud cry followed by breath holding. No preliminary moaning is present. So, let's see 2 types of smiling. Even smiling can be distinguished. Reflexive smile. A reflexive smile is that which does not occur in response to external stimuli and appears during the first month after birth, usually during sleep. Social smile, a smile that occurs in response to an external stimulus, typically a face in the case of young infant. Social smiling occurs as early as 4 to 6 weeks of age in response to a parent's voice. Crying and comforting. So students, if you already have experience with children, you must know that there is no one right way to comfort a crying baby. But there are a lot of different strategies that work. Consider them all tools in your toolbox. When one doesn't work, try the next one. That's all simple. Have you ever asked your parents or grandparents what soothing techniques they used with you? Ever wondered? Swaddling is another word for wrapping your baby. While it may seem strange to us, babies really like being wrapped up so that it's hard for them to move their arms or legs. So, shall we learn how to swaddle a baby? Spread out a large blanket on a flat surface. Turn down the top corner of the blanket to make a triangle. Lay your baby so his head is just above the fold. Hold one arm at his side and bring the blanket flap on that side of his baby across his chest. Tuck the flap behind his back between his body and the other arm. Take the bottom triangle and bring it up to the baby's chest. Now pull up the remaining flap snugly across his chest. To secure the other arm, wrap it behind him as far as it will go. Time on her tummy is good for your baby's physical and overall development. Once she is about a month old and has some head control, try tummy time. When she is awake and you are in the same room, put your baby on a blanket on the floor face down. In time, you may see her use her arms to help lift her torso and head. This is something babies need to learn to do before they start crawling. Tummy time can also be good for your baby's digestion. The firm pressure on her stomach may help relieve gas pains, and as you put her face down, she gets to see the world from a different viewpoint. For babies younger than 2 years old, pacifiers are okay and will not hurt their future teeth. In fact, pacifiers can be a source of comfort to babies. You might think you have an awful singing voice, but your baby doesn't care. He has nobody to compare you to. It will never matter to him if you can carry a tune, and he will be comforted by your voice simply because it is yours. Especially in the first 4 months, a baby's head is very large compared to her body, and her neck muscles are not strong enough to support the weight of her head. Even after 4 months, always make sure to support your baby's head and neck when you are lifting, carrying, bouncing, or rocking, swinging, or dancing. For many babies, using a combination of several comfort strategies all at once is what suits them best. For example, you might swaddle your baby, change her position, give her a pacifier, gently bounce her, and then making shushing sounds. For centuries, parents and grandparents have learned to be creative in order to discover what suits their baby best. Many parents find that trying a little bit of everything is the best way to go. Temperament and environment. A child's temperament describes the way in which she approaches and reacts to the world. It is her personal style. Temperament influences a child's behavior and the way she interacts with others. While temperament does not clearly define or predict behavior, understanding a child's temperament can help families better understand how young children react and relate to the world around them. Information about temperament can also guide parents and caregivers to identify children's strengths and the supports they need to succeed in their relationships and environments. Researchers have described young children's temperament by depicting several different traits. These traits address an infant's level of activity, her adaptability to daily routines, how she responds to new situations, her mood, the intensity of her reactions, her sensitivity to what's going on around her, how quickly she adapts to changes, and how distractible and persistent she might be when engaging in an activity. Based on these traits, researchers generally categorize children into 3 temperament types: easy or flexible. Children tend to be happy, regular in sleeping and eating habits, adaptable, calm, and not easily upset. Active or feisty. Children may be fussy, irregular in feeding and sleeping habits, fearful of new people and situations, easily upset by noise and stimulation, and very intense in their reactions. Slow to warm or cautious. Children may be less active or tend to be fussy and may withdraw or react negatively to new situations, but over time they may become more positive with repeated exposure to a new person, object, or situation. Not all children's temperaments fall neatly into one of these 3 types described. Roughly around 65% of children can be categorized into one of the 3 temperamental types. 40% are easy or flexible, 10% are active or feisty, and 15% can be categorized as slow to warm or cautious. All temperamental traits, like personality traits, range in intensity. Children who have the same temperament type might react quite differently in similar situations or throughout different stages in their development. For example, consider the reactions of 2 infants when a stranger comes into the room. A cautious infant might look for her parent and relax when she makes eye contact, while the other baby with an easy temperament may smile or show little reaction to the stranger. It is important to understand that although a child's basic temperament does not change over time, the intensity of temperamental traits can be affected by a family's cultural values and parenting styles. For example, a family that values persistent, like the ability to stick to a task and keep on trying, may be more likely to praise and reward a child for sticking with some challenging task. Parental recognition of the child's persistent efforts can strengthen the trait, and she may become more persistent and more able to focus over the course of her childhood. A child's temperament to some extent is also influenced by her interactions with the environment. For example, if a child is cared for in an environment that places a high priority on scheduling, predictable sleeping, eating, and diapering, toileting experiences, a child whose biological functions are somewhat irregular might, over a period of time, begin to sleep, eat, and eliminate more regularly. It is important to know that adults cannot force a change to a child's temperament. Self-development and self-awareness. The concept of self is defined by B and Boyd in The Developing Child as one's knowledge of and thoughts about the set of qualities attributed to the self. Piaget's theory offers us an indication of when this develops in infants and toddlers, and Freud also gives some indication of this developed realization of self. American psychologist William James' approach is considered the best hypothesis. William James compartmentalized the global self concept into one compartment, one he called the I and the other he called the me. The I is considered the subjective self, that is the inner sense that I am, I exist. The me aspect is sometimes called the objective self, which is the awareness of the I self that is separate from others. What needs to occur here is the infant and toddler's realization that they are included in the larger scheme of life. In Piaget's theory, one critical element of this is the understanding of object permanence, which develops about 9 to 12 months of age, when the child realizes that mom and dad continue to exist even though they are out of sight. What the infant is also figuring out in some preliminary way is if he exists separately and has some permanence. A good experiment to determine self-awareness in an infant or toddler is the mirror experiment. Having a baby or toddler look into the mirror and acknowledge the reflection and make faces or gestures is a good start. To see if they are acknowledging the reflection as a different person or as themselves, try wiping the face of the reflection to see their reaction. If they flinch as if you are wiping their own face, then you know they are aware that they exist and have developed a self-awareness. Once an infant or toddler is aware of these self-concepts, they can begin to develop a better sense of environment and ability to communicate with other individuals. This can also help them develop a sense of which they are and their overall purpose in the world at that particular time. Having achieved an initial self-awareness, the preschool child begins to define who I am by learning about his or her own qualities and his or her social roles. Now let's summarize. We also looked at the way the infants express emotions, crying and smiling. These are two unique ways in which babies can communicate with the people around them and make them understand the physical needs and wants so that the people can take care of them. In fact, the crying and smiling of infants has a unique and universal effect on people all over the world. All of us are programmed to respond to a child's emotions, whether we are related or not. This is actually nature's way of making sure that the infant who is helpless compared to us is able to take care of its needs.